The mahogany-lined boardroom gleamed under the late afternoon sun, its tall windows casting slanted beams across the polished table. I sat at the far end, Wren Abbott, 32 and unyielding, my face a careful mask of neutrality. James Carver, 47, strutted before the board like a peacock in a pinstripe suit, his voice dripping with rehearsed venom. The other board members, graying men in their 50s and 60s, watched with smirks tugging at their lips, their eyes glinting with the thrill of a long-awaited kill. "Wren," James paused for effect, straightening his silk tie. "Your performance review has been, frankly, lackluster." He paced, heels clicking on the hardwood. "The board agrees. It's time for a shake-up. No more riding your father's coattails." A ripple of amusement passed through the room, poorly concealed. I glanced at my laptop, pretending to check the time. My finger hovered over the record button, then pressed down. Let them talk. Every word was gold. 3 months ago, my father, Daniel Abbott, had collapsed at his desk. Heart attack, they said, leaving me with a wound still raw and a company teetering on the edge. James, his protege-turned-predator, had been circling my position since the funeral, convinced I was just a pampered daughter playing at business. I met his gaze, steady and unblinking. "My department's numbers speak for themselves," I said, voice cool. 40% efficiency increase this quarter. Highest client retention in 5 years. He smirked wider, a predator baring teeth. "Numbers can be fudged, Wren. We all know how you got this seat." The board exchanged knowing looks, their chuckles a low hum. I let it roll off me, my pulse steady. They saw what they wanted, a privileged girl, daddy's shadow. They had no idea what I'd built in the dark. James leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "It's time for changes. Changes that don't include you." The air thickened, their anticipation palpable. I tilted my head just enough to unsettle him. "Is that the board's official stance?" His eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Unanimous." I nodded back, slow and deliberate, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at my lips. Let them savor this moment. They'd choke on it soon enough. My father's voice echoed in my mind. "Let them underestimate you, Wren. It's your best advantage." I closed my laptop, the soft click a gunshot in the silence. They'd just fired their own reckoning. James straightened, savoring his victory as he slid a manila folder across the table, its edges crisp against the wood. "We've uncovered some concerning expenses," he said, voice oily with triumph. I didn't touch it. Inside, I knew, were receipts for business dinners at upscale steakhouses, first-class flights to client meetings. All approved, documented, and tied to contracts worth millions. Facts didn't matter here. This was theater, and I was the villain they'd scripted. "With all due respect," I said, my tone even, "those expenses delivered results." The board saw the reports. James laughed, sharp and hollow. "Results? You mean Daddy's name opening doors?" A board member coughed, hiding a grin. "Your father's not here to protect you anymore, Wren." The words landed like a slap, stinging deeper than I'd let them see. 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days since he'd gone. I pressed my lips together, refusing them the satisfaction of a flinch. "Effective immediately," James continued, relishing each syllable. "You're terminated. Security will escort you out once you've cleared your office." The room erupted in poorly masked chuckles, a chorus of petty triumph. These men had waited years to topple Daniel Abbott's daughter, convinced they were purging a spoiled heiress. I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt, my movements deliberate. Their laughter faltered, expecting tears. Maybe a tantrum. "Very well," I said, gathering my laptop. "I accept your decision." James blinked, thrown by my calm. "That's it? No running to Daddy's lawyers?" I smiled faintly, tucking my belongings under my arm. No need. I'm sure this will sort itself out. His brow furrowed, but he couldn't resist a final jab as I reached the door. Oh, and Ren, we're voting to sell Elmwood Heights. Too much dead weight. I paused, hand on the knob. Elmwood Heights. Dad's dream of affordable housing, fought for through years of red tape. My grip tightened, but my voice stayed soft. I wouldn't do that if I were you. He laughed, loud and brash. What, going to haunt us from the unemployment line? I stepped into the hall without a reply, their guffaws fading behind me. Let them laugh. They thought they'd won, but they'd just lit the fuse. I walked past curious stares in the lobby, whispers already spreading. Office gossip was wildfire. They didn't know yet, but they'd handed me the match. My office was a tomb of glass and steel, the late evening sun painting it gold. Ellie Harper, 28 and fiercely loyal, looked up from her desk, eyes brimming. Miss Abbott, I heard. I'm so sorry. I smiled, soft but sure. Pack up anything personal, Ellie, but don't worry about a new job just yet. She frowned, confused, but nodded. She'd been Dad's assistant before mine, one of the few who knew the real me. I took nothing but a single photo, Dad and me at my college graduation, both beaming. He'd been proudest when I'd started at the bottom, despite his title. At home, I poured a finger of Dad's favorite whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. The photo sat on my desk, his grin steadying me. 10 years ago, he'd sat me down after I'd topped my class in business. Learn the company from the ground up, Ren, he'd said, voice gravelly with wisdom. Let them underestimate you. It's your edge. I'd listened. Every bonus, every commission, every penny I'd earned had gone into buying shares. Quietly, through shell companies, a web they'd never untangled. Now, I owned 70%, not inherited. Mine. James and the board saw a privileged daughter, a figurehead to topple. They didn't know I'd built an empire under their noses, card by card, just as Dad taught. My phone buzzed, texts from James's cronies, gloating. Guess Daddy's princess finally got hers. Back to shopping with his credit cards. I screenshot each one, filing them away. Their arrogance was my ammunition. I opened my laptop, dialing Nathan Brooks, 45, my lead counsel, and a shark in a suit. It's time, I said, voice low. Initialize Project Phoenix. He paused, surprised. Already? We figured they'd wait for the quarterly reports. I sipped the whiskey, its burn grounding me. They got cocky. Start with the shares audit. I want everything ready for the shareholders' meeting. He chuckled. On it. I leaned back, the photo catching my eye again. Dad's lessons had been my armor. Patience, strategy, silence. They'd fired me today, thinking it was the end. They had no idea it was my beginning. I raised the glass, a silent toast. You were right, Dad, I whispered. They never saw me coming. The plan was in motion, and I was ready to play my hand. The next morning, my home office buzzed with quiet purpose, the city skyline a gray blur beyond the window. I sat at my desk, laptop open, the whiskey glass from last night still resting beside Dad's photo. His words lingered. Keep your cards close, Ren, as I dialed Laura Pierce, 50, a tech CEO who'd clawed her way up through the same glass ceilings I'd shattered. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp. Ren, I heard. Moving forward as planned? I nodded, though she couldn't see it. How soon can you transition your contracts? A pause, then a smile in her tone. Give me the word, and we start tomorrow. My board's already greenlit the contingency. I hung up, my fingers dancing across the keyboard, pulling up reports James couldn't bury fast enough. He'd begun his reign with reckless slashes, laying off seasoned staff, cutting corners on quality control, prepping to gut Elmwood Heights. I documented every violation, every email, every memo that crossed ethical lines. My phone buzzed again, more texts from his inner circle, their venom unchecked. Should have stuck to charity galas, princess. I screenshot them, adding to my arsenal. Their overconfidence was a gift, each message a nail in their coffin. Next, I called Nathan Brooks, his voice steady as ever. Shares audit's underway, he confirmed. They're oblivious. Stock transactions are still routing through the usual channels. I leaned back, the chair creaking softly. Good. They got cocky, Nathan. Let's use it. He chuckled, a rare sound. Already digging into their personal accounts, too. You'll have everything by the meeting. I thanked him, my gaze drifting to the photo. Dad had taught me this game. Watch, wait, strike when they're blind. Over the next few weeks, I worked from the shadows, a ghost in their machine. Laura's team quietly shifted contracts, major clients peeling away from James's grasp. He didn't notice, too busy parading his victory, his arrogance making him sloppy. I tracked it all, every layoff that tanked morale, every shortcut that risked safety. The Elmwood Heights sale loomed closer, his signature on every dotted line. I sipped my coffee, the bitter taste sharpening my focus. They thought I was gone, licking wounds. Instead, I was building a guillotine, blade gleaming, ready to drop. A month later, I walked into the company headquarters, the lobby falling silent as I crossed the marble floor. My black dress hugged me like armor, sharp and unrelenting, Dad's vintage watch ticking against my wrist. The emergency shareholders meeting had hit their inboxes that morning, a thunderclap they couldn't ignore. Nathan's audit had uncovered my web of ownership, 70% traced back to me through a maze of shell companies. James hadn't authorized this. He couldn't. I stepped into the elevator, catching his ashen face by the doors. Ren, we need to talk, he stammered. This audit, there's a mistake. I brushed past him, voice low. No mistake, James. Surprised it took you this long. Dad always said you were slow with numbers. The boardroom was a pressure cooker, every seat filled. Board members, shareholders, executives, their faces a gallery of panic. I took Dad's old chair at the head, no one daring to protest, and opened my laptop. The screen flared to life, projecting a spreadsheet of my acquisitions, a decade of silent conquest. Let me make this simple, I began, my voice cutting through the hush. I own 70% of this company, not through inheritance, not through Daddy's gifts, but my own moves over the past 10 years. James stood, mouth working soundlessly, then sank back as I clicked to the next slide. Emails, financial records, proof of their rot. The board's recent actions, I continued, violate company policy and ethical guidelines. Discriminatory firing, client contract breaches, quality control cuts, the attempt to sabotage Elmwood Heights. I have it all. The room erupted, protests overlapping, but I held up a hand, silencing them. Effective immediately. The entire board is suspended, pending investigation. Securities escorting your replacements in now. Executives chosen for integrity, not politics. Footsteps echoed outside, right on cue. James lunged forward, face purple. You can't do this! You're just what, James? I leaned forward, eyes locked on his. The CEO's daughter? You're right. He taught me everything, especially how to let enemies underestimate you. The board raged, chairs scraping, voices rising, but I let it wash over me. Nathan and his team swept in, thick folders in hand, legal documents, my real muscle. You have two choices, I said, voice steady. Resign quietly with basic severance or face legal action for your violations. Pick fast. One by one, they slunk out, dreams of takeover crumbling. James lingered, his earlier swagger a memory, shock etching lines into his face. I closed my laptop, the click final. They'd thought me a pawn, a relic of Dad's reign. Now they saw the queen, checkmate delivered. I stood, smoothing my dress, the watch's tick a heartbeat. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. Dad's legacy, mine to wield. Evening settled over my office, Dad's office, now mine, the city lights flickering beyond the glass. I sat at his desk, The new board gathered around, faces fresh and eager. We'd spent hours outlining the future. Elmwood Heights not just saved, but expanded. A beacon of affordable housing and community care. The staff James fired, I said, tapping a list. Rehire them with back pay. They're the backbone here. Nods circled the table. No smirks, no games. These were people I'd chosen, not inherited. The meeting ended, chairs pushed back, voices fading as they left. I stayed, alone with the hum of the building, my fingers tracing the desk's edge. Dad had carved his initials here once, a quiet claim. I opened a drawer, pulling out his plans for Elmwood Heights, blueprints, notes in his jagged scrawl. He'd fought for this, believing business should lift people, not just profits. James had nearly torched it, not anymore. I stood, slipping the plans into my bag, and drove to the cemetery, the night air cool against my skin. Dad's grave stood under an oak, fresh flowers from last week still bright. I knelt, placing a new bouquet beside his headstone, the stone cold under my touch. We did it, Dad, I whispered, voice catching. They never saw me coming, just like you said. The wind rustled the leaves, a soft reply. I'd turned their ambush into my ascent, their laughter into silence. Elmwood Heights would rise, bigger than he'd dreamed, because I'd learned his lessons well. Patience, vision, the power of being unseen. Back home, I poured another whiskey, the photo on my desk glowing under the lamp. His grin steadied me, a promise kept. My phone buzzed. Ellie, texting updates, new board settling in, clients are thrilled. I smiled, sipping the drink, its warmth spreading. The fight wasn't over, James wouldn't fade quietly, but I was ready. This was my company now, forged in my hands, not just his. I raised the glass, a silent vow. The next move was mine, and I'd play it my way. 6 months later, I met Diane Carver at a quiet coffee shop, the hum of espresso machines filling the air. She sat across from me, 45, her once polished society wife veneer replaced by a raw, determined edge. Divorce had stripped her bare, and she liked it that way. Thank you for coming, she said, hands tight around her cup. There's something you need to know. I leaned in, the steam curling between us. James? She nodded, eyes hard. He's planning something. He and the old board. They've been meeting secretly. I'd known about the meetings. My security team had tracked every move. But her next words froze me. They're going after Elmwood Heights, she said. Richard found contamination reports from the 70s. Industrial waste. He's doctoring them to leak to the media, make it look like your father knew, covered it up, and you're doing the same. My blood ran cold. Dad had flagged those traces years ago, ensured proper remediation. In the wrong hands, though, it was dynamite. Why tell me, I asked. She smiled, bitter. 23 years, and he never saw me as more than a trophy. Sound familiar? I texted Nathan mid-sip. Initiate Protocol Delta. Our contingency for this exact play. James's timing was clever. The project's first phase nearly done. Families picked for the units. The next morning, his move hit. Every news outlet got an anonymous tip. Social media erupting with accusations. I called a press conference at the Elmwood Heights site, the half-built community center stark against the sky. Reporters swarmed, James lurking at the edge, his smirk barely hidden. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, voice steady. Yesterday, some tried to derail this project with lies. Today, I'll show you the truth. Engineers stepped forward, real data in hand. Tests, remediation logs, safety protocols. Families spoke next, their hope drowning out the noise. Then, I landed the blow. And now, thanks to Diane Carver's generous donation, we're expanding, adding a community center with free childcare and job training. James's smirk vanished, cameras catching his shock. The story flipped overnight, from scandal to redemption. Diane had handed me the win, and I'd turned his dagger into dust. A week later, Ellie burst into my office, face pale, her usual calm shattered. "Turn on the news," she said, breathless. I flicked on the screen, and there was James, standing outside headquarters in a rumpled suit, flanked by former board members. His practiced smile had a desperate edge, weight loss to sleepless nights. "We're filing a class action lawsuit," he declared, voice thin. "Ren Abbott manipulated share prices, coerced us into selling." I watched, coffee in hand, unfazed. He thought he had one last card. He didn't know I'd already trumped it. I dialed Laura Pierce, her voice sharp on the first ring. "Saw the news," she said. "What do you need?" I smiled, leaning back. "Those offshore accounts James ran his side deals through. Time to bring them to light." She laughed, low and fierce. "Give me an hour." By noon, financial reporters broke a different story. James and his cronies caught in a web of kickbacks and insider trading. Evidence overwhelming. Anonymously sourced. I'd known about those accounts for months, waiting for the right moment. This was it. From my office window, I watched FBI agents swarm the street below, sunlight glinting off their badges. James stumbled out, hands cuffed, his suit a wrinkled shell. He looked up, eyes meeting mine through the glass. I raised my coffee cup, a mock toast, the corner of my mouth lifting. His glare faltered, then fell. The man who'd laughed me out of the boardroom was gone, his empire of arrogance in ruins. The news cycle spun, his arrest dominating headlines, Elmwood Heights glowing in the aftermath. Ellie peeked in, a grin breaking through. "Stocks up 5 points already." I nodded, setting the cup down. "Good. Tell Laura thanks." James had aimed for my throat and hit his own instead. I turned back to the window, the city sprawling below. Dad's lessons had carried me here. Strike when they're weakest, let their hubris pave the way. This wasn't just victory, it was justice, clean and final. 1 year after my firing, I stood on a podium at Elmwood Heights, the sun warm on my shoulders, hundreds gathered below. The first families clutched keys, their smiles bright against the new brick buildings. The Daniel Abbott Community Center hummed behind me, already alive with classes. Diane, running programs, her calling found. I cut the ribbon, red silk parting under the scissors, applause rolling through the crowd. James's revenge had backfired. His scandal had tripled housing applications. Other firms, now, begging our guidance. Catherine sat front row, beaming, her donation a cornerstone of this day. Next to her, Ellie, now chief of staff, scribbled notes, her promotion earned. I stepped off the podium, shaking hands when a young woman approached, nervous but determined. "Miss Abbott," she said, "I'm Maya Carver, James's daughter. I know this is awkward, but I've followed what you've done here. Any entry-level openings?" She was 22, fresh from business school, her eyes echoing my own hunger years ago. "Your father hasn't spoken to me since I testified at his trial," she added, chin up. "He never thought I had a head for business either." I studied her, seeing the spark he'd missed. "When can you start?" I asked. Her face lit up, a mirror to my own beginnings. "Monday," she said, firm. I nodded, turning back to the crowd, their chatter a living pulse. This was Dad's dream. Success that lifted others, not just balance sheets. Later, I visited his grave, the headstone freshly engraved. Beloved father and mentor, his legacy lives on. I set down flowers, their scent mingling with the earth. "You should see it now, Dad," I said softly. "Elmwood Heights is just the start, 3 more neighborhoods next." My phone buzzed. Ellie with stock highs, Laura doubling contracts. I touched the stone, a final goodbye, then walked away, ready for tomorrow. James had thought he'd ended me. Instead, he'd launched me, and I'd built something bigger than he'd ever dreamed. 2 years after that boardroom ambush, I sat in my office, Dad's office, night cloaking the city beyond the glass. Reports glowed on my laptop, profits up, employee turnover at record lows, Elmwood Heights, a model replicated globally. Photos lined my desk, one of Dad and me at graduation, another with the first Elmwood residents, all grinning. My phone buzzed, Laura, ready for an international expansion talk. I smiled, the lessons clear, battles fought, victories won, enemies' arrogance my ladder. Ellie appeared in the doorway, sharp in her chief of staff role. Miss Abbott, the new board's waiting, strategy meeting. I glanced at Dad's photo, his grin steady as ever. Coming, Ellie, I said, standing. We've got work to do. I smoothed my jacket, Dad's watch ticking against my wrist. They'd called me the CEO's daughter, a title meant to diminish. They never understood it meant learning from the best, business, integrity, turning underestimation into power. James's laughter was a distant echo, his ending my beginning. I strode out, the company's transformation unfinished, new challenges ahead. I was ready, not just his daughter anymore, but the CEO who'd made success a rising tide for all.